grab this here. We got our house mic up maybe just a little bit. There we go. So listen, we got the man here to the left of me. I know we want to hear from him. But we're going to give him a nice Albuquerque welcome. So I'm going to share just a couple of fun facts. I have to admit, I watched his movie. Has anyone ever seen Street Fight? Let me tell you, we all are here probably for the presidential race, but I got to tell you, this is one of the best mayors America has seen in recent years. And I'm aspiring to be for real, I'm mayor probably. And here's proof. When I was running for this job that I thank you for, I will tell you the number one thing that I learned for our city's crime plan. Chapter 7 in his book. If you read it, it is all about dealing with addiction. It's about dealing with crime from all sides. It's about addressing gun violence. It's even about dealing with anti-racism, dealing with issues around all the hatred that's being spread in America. And so I am grateful already for what Cory Booker has given our city in terms of ideas and inspiration and policies in his role as mayor, but also for what he is fighting for in our U.S. Senate. Because on those issues, he is leading the charge. And so for us, of course, he is the first presidential candidate who is having an open invite event in the city of Albuquerque. Special and honored to welcome presidential candidate Cory Booker.
All right. So first of all, I have this love for American mayors, and there are extraordinary ones around the country, but you all have a standout mayor. And Tim, would you give him a round? Handsome, he has a full head of hair. I'm so damn jealous right now. I also have to give a shout out to a guy who's not here, but one of my best friends in all of politics, who's taught me more about your state. Because when I'm in the cloakroom and he sees me, he's always corralling me about New Mexico issues, and that's your Senator Martin Heinrich. Usually I get a chance to give my speech, answer questions, wade into the crowd with selfies. They're already telling me that I got a long drive to Santa Fe. So I want to jump in and say some remarks, and then instead of taking questions, I'm going to stand in the crowd and try to take as many selfies as I can. I may not get to everybody, but I'm still trying to break the record for bald presidential candidates from New Jersey. I think I can make the Guinness Book of World Records for that. But look, I really want to get to the heart of the matter. And when I say heart, I am very serious, because this presidential election, there is an incredible great field of Democratic candidates in the 2020 race. In fact, the 2020 race does not stand for the year, it stands for the number of us running, 2020. And I'm a big policy wonk nerd. And I just love when we have been able to shape the national conversation. Our housing policy has incredible pillars that I've always wanted to put out there, and I've challenged my peers in this presidential race to do what we're doing, like having refundable tax credits for renters. We give a mortgage interest reduction for homeowners. Hell, we should give some deductions to renters as well. I love our gun legislation, which, God bless America, it's common sense. If you need a license to drive a car, you should have a license to buy. Yes. There are issues that we talk about that aren't celebrated, but we made a point about them, like why in America do we so disrespect our elders and we say to them, as you get older, the only way you're going to qualify for Medicaid is to burn through your entire life savings, go into poverty in order to qualify. We have a pillar to end that. There's so many aspects of my policy that I am so proud of. In incentivizing the wrong things in our ag bill that make a Twinkie cheaper than an apple in our local bodegas. I can go on and on and on. But actually, I want to tell you right now, I do not think that this election is going to turn on the policy differences and the nuances, who's got a better 10-point policy plan. No. I believe this election is going to go not just from the head, but it's also going to be about the heart. And even deeper than the heart, it's the soul of our nation. So let me give my talk about that right now. Because I really do believe if we don't get to the soul of our nation, if we don't get back to what our common virtues are after years of moral vandalism from the current president, we will not create the context in which the kind of big legislation that I yearn for can get passed. Because right now we are falling into a deep tribalism in our country. And that really is fear-based politics, us against them politics, zero-sum game politics. We are beginning to lose the understanding that in this nation we have common cause and common purpose. I call in this election time and time again for revival of civic grace, for more courageous empathy for one another, and to remember that in this nation, patriotism means love of country, but you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. Now hold on. There's a lot of y'all are applauding, but there's somebody sitting back there in the back going like, I don't know if you can beat Donald Trump with love, Cory Booker. Hell, I was running for the stage in Iowa. I'm about to jump up on the stage. Big dude sees me and he puts his arm around me and he goes, he's a big guy. You see, I'm a big guy, former tight end for Stanford, former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And so big dude sees me, puts his arm around me and he goes, dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I look at him and I go, dude, that's a felony, man. We are not going to win back this country by fighting Donald Trump on his turf, on his terms, using his tactics. We are not going to save this nation by showing the worst of who we are. And by the way, that's what Donald Trump was. But we know that the gardens of our democracy have never been free of the weeds of bigotry and hatred and divisiveness and demagoguery. They never have been. We've had the Know-Nothing Party that uses the same rhetoric as this president. They were anti-immigration then, but then they were against German and Irish immigrants. We had McCarthyism appealing to our fears, trying to make us afraid of one another. We had the number one radio show in America was a guy named Father Compton who had anti-Semitic screeds. We've always had these things. But how did we beat them? How did we beat Bull Connor in Birmingham? Did we break bigger dogs than he had and more powerful fire hoses? No, we didn't. We had artists of activism that awoke the moral imagination of our country, that called to the consciousness of our citizens, who said and reminded us that democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy is a verb. It was King that reminded us that the problem we have today is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the silence and inaction of the good people. So, somebody asked me why Cory Booker's running for president. I want you to say, well, he's a big nerd, he's got some great policy plans. But he's running for president because he wants to revive that civic grace. He wants to talk to the soul of our nation. He wants to heal and remind us that we all have an obligation to get folk woke. We all have an obligation to understand that this is a moment that is not a referendum on one guy in one office. This election is a referendum on us and who we are and who we must be to each other. Now, I want you to know, I didn't come to this conclusion because, I'm some kind of enlightened guy. My father used to always say, boy, you got a hard head. He used to look at me and see I got all these degrees from different schools. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you get. You see, my dad was reminding me, like all you drank deeply from wells of freedom and liberty that you didn't dig. He'd say it to me very pointedly, boy, you're eating lavishly from banquet tables prepared for you by the sacrifices and struggles of those who came before. And you don't sit around this house getting dumb, fat, and happy, consuming all the blessings that were prepared for you by your ancestors. You got to consume those blessings, let them metabolize in your body to give you energy to keep on fighting. Yeah. And I want to tell you, we got to fight. Because right now, what bothers me is that we are seeing an impotency of empathy in our nation. I want to be clear what I mean by that. You know, I live in a neighborhood that I'm so proud of. We don't confuse wealth with worth. I live in an inner city neighborhood, the only senator that lives in a black and brown community below the poverty line. I've been there for decades. And let me tell you, it is a beautiful community. And these folks taught me some of the best lessons of my life. I may have got my BA from Stanford, but I got my PhD on the streets of Newark. And I'll never forget when I was a law student, I came to Newark with a high sense of self-regard. I knocked on the tenant president of the projects I would move into and live in for almost a decade. When I first showed up, I felt like John Wayne coming in. I was going to be the savior, I'm going to help this community out. And this elderly woman, about 5 feet and a smidgen tall, she looks at me and she goes, "Why are you here?" I was strange. She didn't recognize me. I go, "Ma'am, I'm from Yale Law School and I'm here to help you." And she gave me this look like, "Boy, you're the one that needs some help." And she takes me down to Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark, New Jersey, and says, "Well, if you want to help me, you got to tell me what you see here." I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Describe my neighborhood." And I described it, what I saw. There was a crack house, the projects, there were drug dealing. I just described the neighborhood. But the more I talked, the more angry she got. And suddenly I just stopped and I'm like, "Well, what's wrong?" She goes, "You can't help me." And she starts walking away. And I run after her and I stop her. And I'm like, "Ma'am, what are you talking about?" And she goes, "Boy, you need to understand something. The world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. If you're one of these people who looks at my community and all you see is problems, darkness, and despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see possibility, you see hope, you see love, you see the face of God, then you can be one of those people that helps me." And she left me there in the streets thinking to myself, "Okay, grasshopper, thus ended the lesson." We are here today because in the midst of slavery, black folks and white folks came together and never stopped fighting for their vision of a free land. We're here today because folks in the midst of second-class citizenship for women, they never stopped seeing a vision for women having equal rights, equal justice, equal suffrage. We're here today because in the midst of sweatshops and child labor, activists never stopped seeing a nation that had universal public schools and workers' rights. Our very national anthem starts with vision. Oh, say, can you see? How can we be a nation right now that has this now a vision that is clogged, where we can't even see hope and possibility, where we actually stopped even seeing each other, seeing each other's hurts, each other's pain, and each other's struggle, and not remembering that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We have this problem, and you all know it. Why am I fighting for that revival of civic grace? It's because in my community, when they hear that the number one thing Democrats want is just to beat Donald Trump, people in my community, I know there's folks here that think to themselves, "Wow, that's the biggest aspiration for the Democratic Party? Can't we dream a little bigger than that?" Beating Donald Trump is the floor, it is not the ceiling. And you look around America, from my community to ones in yours, where you see folks working full-time jobs. And in my neighborhood, I still see them having to use food stamps to feed their family. I was going on before Donald Trump, and it's a sign of our commitment to one another. You look around now, we're a nation of all the industrial nations. We leave them in child poverty. We leave them in infant mortality. We leave them in maternal mortality. That is a testimony to what we believe and what we do for one another. How can we be a nation right now that treats mental illness and addiction more with jail and prison than health care and treatment? I want you to know I am fighting in this election. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I am your president, I'm going to ask for more from you than any president has ever asked before. Because I'm not going to ask you to put up with more. Heck, I'm not going to ask you, unless you're very wealthy, to pay more taxes. But I'm going to ask you to fight more, to give more, because we're the people that always make the change. If you want to create a climate where we can make big change in America, it's not going to be by getting one person elected, because democracy is a team sport. We have got to be prepared for the long fight to get rid of Mitch McConnell as the leader. We have got to be prepared for the long fight to make sure that we don't allow gerrymandering and dark money and voter suppression, all the things that are undermining our democracy. We've got to, and the Supreme Court, thank you very much. You see, I was taught by a woman in Newark to look at our children and look at our communities and look at our country with bigger visions and bigger aspirations. To not just settle for incremental change. I believe that American history is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of the impossible. But I know one thing, we got a problem in our country if we start aspiring to big things like, oh, people say proudly, we're a nation of tolerance. Well, we're not called to tolerate each other. Heck, I tolerated the cold I had last week. Tolerance couldn't care less. A nation of love couldn't care more. Tolerance crosses the street. Love confronts and embraces. Tolerance, you see it right now, they build walls. Love tears them down and builds bridges. The vision of this country has to be one that is bolder, more energizing. If we start to think our campaign is just about triangulating and modulating in order to just beat Donald Trump, we're going to miss what this nation needs right now, which is to go so much further than that. How are we going to leave the planet to deal with the climate crisis if we can't even pass a comprehensive piece of legislation that does the obvious thing, like put a price on carbon, the obvious things like change our agricultural practices, the obvious things? This is the call of this moment. And I want to tell you all, when I came up in my life, my parents told me what makes change. My parents reminded me it wasn't a bunch of people on the Senate floor in 1920, a bunch of senators didn't get together on the Senate floor and say, hey fellas, what do you think? It's time to give women the right to vote. Okay, let's do it. Let's go. Great. That's not how it happened. It happened by the activism of us. It wasn't one day Strom Thurmond coming to the Senate floor and said, I have seen the light. Those Negro people deserve some rights. No. 50 years ago, this summer, my family was trying to move to New Jersey, and every time they showed up in communities with the best public schools, they would be met by a real estate agent who would lie to them and say, oh, this house is sold, it's been pulled off the market. They were frustrated. And they found a group of Americans who understood that patriotism is about love. And love says if your kids don't have a great public school to go to, then my kids are less off. And they formed what I call a conspiracy of love. Every time my parents went to look at a house and were told it was sold, they sent a volunteer white couple right behind them, and they found out the house was still for sale. In the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold, a white couple found out it was still for sale, and amazingly, the white couple put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, in the real estate agent's office, The white couple didn't show up. My dad did, and a volunteer lawyer named Marty Friedman. They confronted the real estate agent. The real estate agent was sitting down, sees my dad walk in, his jaw drops. Marty comes in, starts to confront him about his violation of American values, and this guy doesn't even wait. He stands up, the real estate agent punches my dad's lawyer in the face, sings a dog on my dad. Let me tell you, every time my dad was telling this story as I was growing up in this beautiful community, the dog would get bigger. Eventually my dad was like, boy, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. Why have I spent my life doing what I do? Why did I move to Newark right out of law school to be a tenants' rights lawyer? Because people fought for my housing rights. But I want to challenge everybody here. Because when I got to the Senate, I did what a lot of senators do, who have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And when your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure, folks. Okay? I knew mayors like Mayor Tim would be reading this book, so I was like, I gotta be prepared. And so I went out to find the people from the 1960s that helped my family move in. And the head of the Fair Housing Council in Northern Jersey was easy to find because at 92 years old, she is still head of the Fair Housing Council in Northern New Jersey. And now she doesn't represent black folks, a lot of black folks in my community. She represents same-sex couples, Muslim families, Americans with disabilities, because for her, justice has no color, it has no race, has no orientation. It is one justice, one nation, one love. And she tells me the story. She confirms it was not a pack of wolves. But then she sends me to the lawyer. And I call this guy up, and he tells me his story, and he's telling me that he was really struggling to make it when he started doing this. He had a business that was barely making it, trying to support his family. And I finally said, sir, well, why would you spend so much time helping black families move into your community? And he said to me, Cory, I remember the moment I made that decision. And I go, really? Because this was at the time of fears of white flight and real estate prices going down. What made you do it? He goes, well, I remember the moment. I go, well, tell me what the moment was. He goes, it was March 7th, 1965. And I go, well, what was happening on March 7th, 1965? And he goes, well, it was the end of a long week, and I was just sitting on my couch watching TV. Now, some of you younger people might find this shocking, but we only had 3 channels back then. And he's sitting there watching a movie that most of America was watching that night called Judgment at Nuremberg. Now, I didn't remember this when he told me this. Now the date I know, but on that date, March 7th, 1965, most of America was watching a movie, and then something happened that was rare back then. They pulled away from an ongoing movie to show breaking news. They showed a bridge in Alabama. And this bridge is called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And these marchers had started in Selma trying to march to Montgomery, and they got stopped by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass. And this white guy on a couch 1,000 miles away says he sees something horrible happen next. They gas these marchers, they shoot tear gas at them, and to his horror, these troopers storm in and start beating them viciously. This day is known as Bloody Sunday. And so what does a white guy on a couch 1,000 miles away do when he sees this? Does he do what I sometimes make the mistake of doing? Allowing your inability to do everything to undermine your determination to do something? No, he doesn't. Does he do what I sometimes do, which is fall into that trap that is the most common way that we give up our power? Is not realizing we have it in the first place? No, he doesn't do that. He stands up and starts to stress. He says, I got to do something, but I can't close my business. I can't afford a plane ticket to Birmingham, Alabama, to Selma, Alabama. And so he thinks to himself, you know what? I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have, where I am. And so he thinks to himself, I can afford 1 hour a week of pro bono work And he starts calling around to see who needs some help. And he finds this woman, now 92 years old, but then a young woman, and she says, hallelujah, I need some help. And he says the two of them go to working, and amazingly, he says, we get other people involved. 65 turns to 66. I get more lawyers involved. 66 turns to 67 to 68. He goes, now we got this sting operation going. He goes, and then it becomes 1969, and he tells me he'll never forget the day. He gets this case file of this couple moving from the South, trying to come into his community. And he goes, Cory, the name on that case file was Cory and Carolyn Booker, your parents. I am literally a United States Senator. Not because of who was the president back then. I'm literally running for president of the United States, not because of who the senators were back then. I am here, you are here, we are here, because of Americans who knew that the lines that divide them were not as strong as the ties that bind them. We are here. We are here because of Americans who every day did real things to put more indivisible into this one nation under God. We are here not because of small dreams and small aspirations, but because in their generation, people had this belief that all Americans, independent, Republican, Democrat, all Americans, black and white and Latino, all Americans, Christian, Jewish, Baha'i, Jain, all Americans, could make in this fertile soil a nation that becomes a light unto other nations, a light of freedom and a light of justice, a light of hope and a light of promise. I'm running for president because I believe that this isn't just our past, it must be our future. And that we, in this election, can reclaim those ideals, then the issues that are plaguing our nation right now, epidemic gun violence, the issues that are plaguing our nation, falling short, way short from being a country where healthcare is a right for all. The issues that are plaguing our nation right now, where millions of seniors are living in poverty because their social security checks don't go far enough. The issues that mock our very patriotic songs and slogans, like us saying that we're the home of the brave, but our veterans are disproportionately homeless. I believe that if we can make this election about our values and our virtues and our common bonds, then we won't just beat Donald Trump. We will regain the American spirit. And so I want to tell you right now, I'm going to run all over this country. And I ain't going to get tired. I ain't going to get weary. And I'm going to tell you right now, in this election, make the decision on who you support, not just with your head. Make it with your heart. Make it with your gut. Make it with the person that you know isn't going to vilify folks to get to the White House. Yeah. It's not going to demean or degrade anybody. Hell, I tell Democrats, in this moral moment, our cause isn't to beat Republicans, it's to unite Americans. I hope you all will think about supporting my campaign. Going to CoryBooker.com, signing up. I hope that you will say, what can I do now in this moment? And I tell you right now, everybody's telling me, Cory, the polls. And I remind them that never before has a president in my lifetime gone on to be president from our party who was leading in the polls this far out from the primary. In fact, the only people that have gone on to be president from our party were young guys with better heads of hair, but young people who were considered long shots at this point. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, some dude that married up a woman named Michelle. They were all considered long shots, but they were people that reignited something in us. That knew that ideals like love and hope are not weak. They're actually the substance of what this country is made of. That we need people that can energize the country to come out and participate and engage again. And to look upon their fellow countrywoman and their fellow countryman, not as enemies, but as allies. I look at intelligence reports. Our enemies overseas, the strategy that they're using right now, the Russians, what they're doing now to us is what Khrushchev warned about, that they were going to see this country be destroyed from within. We now have enemies that are trying to use our social media platforms to make us hate each other. Amen. This is unacceptable to me. We need to revive that empathy, because we used to be a nation that when 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham, God, we responded and changed laws. When women in a fire at the shirtwaist factory were throwing themselves out windows, escaping the blaze, but dying on the pavement below, this whole country said that's wrong. And we changed laws. How have we gotten to the point in America now where we're capitulating our very freedom from fear, freedom from violence, where we watch people die, slaughtered at a concert in Las Vegas or a nightclub in Orlando, and we do nothing? How have we gotten to a point in America where people are dying at their home houses of worship, a church in South Carolina, a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and we do nothing? How could we have gotten to a point in America where our children are being shot in schools, and our message to them this fall is not that we're the strongest nation on the planet and we will protect you. Our message to them is, hey, we're going to send you to school and teach you how to hide, to run drills on how to shelter in place. And so I want to end with not a high, but a hurt. Because yeah, we're hurting right now. There is pain in this country like I've never seen it before. People who are right now not here because they're home and they feel isolated because we stigmatize them because they're survivors of sexual assault. We stigmatize them because of their mental illness. We stigmatize them because of their addiction. We stigmatize them and leave them alone when they're trying to take care of their spouse with Alzheimer's or their child with special needs. We're not showing them the love that is worthy of our greatness. I want to leave you with my own painful story. Why I am rolling up my sleeves, not just working in this campaign, why I am ready to be president. It was 2004 in my city of Newark. I had lost that election in 2002, and the mayor's right. If you're going to have a spectacular failure, have a documentary team there to capture it. Because that election, if you haven't seen it, an Oscar-nominated documentary on Netflix called Street Fight. People want to know, can you fight with Donald Trump? I'm like, dude, I came up through Newark politics. I can fight, and I can win. Watch Street Fight, but then the problem with Street Fight, I don't know if you know this, Mayor, in the Oscars, it then loses to a movie called March of the Dagnab Penguins. I'm a vegan, but I have a problem. I fight for animals every day in the Senate. Me and Martin have had a lot of conversations because he likes to shoot them. But it was after I lost that election, before I would eventually run, I was walking in my neighborhood, and gunshots rang out. Now this happens a lot in communities all across this country. 100 people die of gun violence every day, but most of the times we don't hear about it. When I called the state legislator in Philadelphia to ask about those awful shootings of those officers, we commiserated about that pain that an officer puts on a uniform, goes to work, and might not come home. But then he tells me that they've had 8 mass shootings in Philly this year. I didn't know it. Because often those shootings happen in communities like mine that don't get talked about. And so I'm walking in my neighborhood with my dad who was visiting me, and gunshots rang out, and I turned around and ran towards the gunfire. His kids were running past me. Off-duty cop was right behind me. He sprints up the hill too, and there we see a teenager with gunshots in his chest. I tried to do everything I could to stop his bleeding. Blood was everywhere. This dramatization of violence, it is such a gruesome thing to watch a person die from bullet holes in their chest. I was screaming for an ambulance, screaming for him to stay with me. His name was Wazin. fully blood pouring from his mouth. I jammed my fingers in, trying to clear a passageway, praying to God that he would breathe, just breathe. By the time the ambulance got up there and shoved me out of the way, and ripped open his shirt, I saw the bullet holes in his chest, and I knew he was gone. I came down the hill where my dad was standing. I saw the way he looked at me. I told him to go back to where I was living in the high-rise projects, and I turned to face the police director, who was the police director for the mayor that had beaten me, but even he showed me a compassionate eye, because to this day he says to me, "You look like you were in trauma." I don't even remember how I got back to the projects, but I do remember that moment when my dad opened the door and sees his son filled with another boy's blood. I didn't want to talk to my father. We had the closest of relationships, but I just needed to get away. I pushed past him, and I went to the bathroom, and I closed the door, and I put my hands in the sink and started trying to scrub them from this boy's blood, and all the blood was gone off my hands, but I kept washing my hands because they felt so dirty. I tore off my clothes and jumped into the shower, and somebody here might know this feeling that when you turn the water on so hot that you hope that the pain on the outside could dull the pain on the inside, but something in that bathroom broke in me, and for the first time in my life, I felt such anger at my country. That how could I see child after child die in communities like this and nothing happens? How can we put our hands on our hearts and swear an oath, make a pledge to liberty and justice for all? But God, today I did not see justice. I went to bed that night and got up in the morning and went down into the lobby of my building, and as I crossed through the lobby, something made me think of Miss Virginia Jones, that tenant president that I told you was one of my great life professors, because her son was murdered in the lobby in which I walked through, and she never left our community. I remember asking her why, and she looked at me bemused by the question. She goes, "I still stay here because I'm in charge of Homeland Security." She was a strange woman that knew in life you have one decision to make over and over again, which is to accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing. Well, I walked out into the courtyard that early morning just as the sun had come up, and nobody was in the courtyard. I felt like I was 1,000 feet underwater screaming, but there was one person. Nobody in the courtyard, but one person at the other end of the courtyard between the projects, and it was Miss Virginia Jones. Her back was to me, but she must have heard my inside screaming, because she turned around, and this elderly woman who had seen the wretchedness of our nation, but yet never stopped fighting for this country. She did the one thing I needed in that moment in my life. She opened up her arms like this, to call for me to come in for a hug. Now, I'm 6'3", big guy. She's a small woman, but I ran through that courtyard like a little boy and just let her hug me, and I hugged her. And she held me so tight, and I broke down and I cried. And then as she's rubbing my back, she said 2 words. And God, these are the 2 words I want to leave you with. She said 2 words that have nothing to do about religion, but everything to do with our civic gospel. She rubbed my back, and she said these 2 words that speak to the truth of how we got here today and how we must get to that mountaintop I talked about. She said 2 words that I leaned on when I was mayor on my toughest days. 2 words that I've said to myself as a senator on those days I feel like I'm banging my head against implacable walls of resistance. The 2 words that I've even said to myself now as a presidential candidate, running on sometimes more than 2 planes in one day and leaning on the spirit of those great Americans I encountered. As she rubs my back as I cry in her arms, these are the 2 words she says. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Well, friends, we have come a mighty long way because of the faith of our ancestors, who even when they faced down the most wretchedness and injustice of this country could ever offer, they never lost faith in America. They never lost faith in who we are. We We got to stay faithful because now more than ever we need that faith and that love. That spirit that says in America, like that poet Langston Hughes, there's a dream in this land, but it's back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. We got to stay faithful. Because this nation doesn't need just the best of our ideas, but it needs our guts, it needs our grit, it needs our hope, it needs our hearts, it needs our faith right now. We have folks that are trying to tear us down and divide us against each other. We need our faith and our love and our unity right now. And I want to tell you this. People are going to try to make this a small election about one guy in one office. But I'll tell you once again, this election is about us. It is a test of our spirits. It's a test of our hearts. It's a test of the size of our dreams and the quality of our mercy. It is a test of our faith. And if we stay faithful, then we will achieve a nation that really is a nation of liberty and justice for all. If we stay faithful, we'll restore the hope for Americans that are losing it. If we stay faithful, no matter how much one guy tries to tear us down, we, America, will rise.